All right, class. So for this next video, I would like to go over the first reading that you will have for this class. And the first reading is a reading written by an author, a Dominican American author by the name of Junot Diaz. And Junot Diaz is writing a piece about his mother. It's a very short piece, so I'm actually going to start reading it for you on camera so that you can watch how I'm processing my thinking. Okay, I'm going to think out loud and I want you to see how I'm processing my thinking. So I'm going to share screen with you. And you'll see this attachment on your first assignment for the class. Now, the question is going to ask you to think about how you define love, right? What is your definition of love? And whether you find examples of that definition in the story. Now, remember, your definition of love could be love of others, of other people, a love of animals, a passion or a love that you have for a hobby. Whatever your definition of love is, I want you to think about whether or not you find examples of that definition in the story. So I'm going to start reading this for you and I'm going to think aloud. I'm going to show you how I am processing what I read. All right, you ready? Let's do it. The Dreamer. So one thing that I noticed about the title in this piece is that it's written all in lowercase. So I thought that was stylistically, that was interesting. And then below the title, he says, an essay about my mom as a girl trying to get her education. This is something that was published in May of 2011. Okay. So now the author has told us what this story is going to be about. He has revealed the purpose of the story. This is a short essay about his mom when she was a little girl and her pursuit of education. I think of my mother, of course. She's one of those iron-willed, rarely speak figures that haunt. See her in New Jersey, in the house with the squirrels in the back, that she feeds sparingly, they shouldn't get fat, and that she chides when she thinks they're acting up. You wouldn't know it looking at her in that kitchen, but she grew up one of those poor third world country girls, the brutalized backbone of our world. The kind of Dominican girl who is destined never to get off the mountain or out of the campo. Her own mother, a straight-haired terror, expected her to work on the family farm until she died or was married off. But my mother, in those small spaces between the work-cultivated dreams, that unbreakable habit of the young. When the field hands were hurt or fell ill, she was the one who cared for them. Opened in her a horizon, a dream of being a nurse in the capital, where she heard that every block had electricity. But to be a nurse, you needed education. And while some other girls who attended the one-room school at the base of the hill, my mother was not one of them. Her mother, my grandmother, demanded that she stay on the farm, that she stay a mule. No one more threatened by the thought of an educated girl than my grandmother. Anytime my mother was caught near the schoolhouse, my grandmother gave her a beating, and not the beatings of the first world, but the beatings of the third, which you do not so easily shake off. So I'm going to stop right there and I'm going to give you some of my first observations. I thought it was interesting that he opens up his essay as if he were answering a question, right? As if someone asked him a question that we didn't get to hear, but he's answering it. I think of my mother, of course. We don't necessarily know what the question is, though. I thought that was interesting. His description of his mom, right? I felt like, you know, she looks like she's playful. She seems like, you know, she's someone that has this like childlike energy to her. And I noticed that a big transition was one short sentence that I was like, oh my God, there's going to be a change in the story, right? He says right here when he said, the brutalized backbone of our world. All of a sudden, the tone changed for me. I was like, "Ooh, okay, that stood out to me." So if I was taking notes, right, I would probably highlight this, right? I would probably make a little note right here, you know, something like, you know, he's answering a question, but we don't know the question. I would start processing my reactions to the story. A couple of things, other things that stood out to me that were really beautiful. I thought this sentence right here really stood out to me. I really resonated with that. So, you know, that 14 note that tells you how you feel, that asks you to identify how you feel when you're reading something, that made me feel emotional. That made me feel inspired. And it reminded me of what I felt like when I was, you know, in high school, you know, getting ready to like go to college. I remember feeling like it was such a far off dream for me, right? That it felt like, oh, it was going to take forever to get there. And so in those notes, I would probably put something along the lines of, you know, I had an emotional reaction here and it reminded me when I was getting ready to go to college. Another line that really stood out to me was this one right here. No one more threatened by the thought of an educated girl than my grandmother, because I feel like, you know, as someone that has experienced a lot of challenges in getting my education and becoming a professor and being here, I can identify the fact that a lot of people didn't necessarily, I mean, I received a lot of help, of course, that I'm very grateful for, but a lot of people really made things difficult for me, right? In the pursuit of higher of learning. While some mentored me and like encouraged me, there were a lot of people that created challenges for me. So I connected with that line. So I hope that that is giving you an idea, right, of how I want you to process this particular piece. Because again, the question is, how do you define love? And do you recognize that definition of love in this story? There's going to be a format that you have to follow in your response, and that is paragraph format. And I will make sure to upload a video with instructions on how do you write a paragraph. But pay attention to how your mind is processing and what steps you are taking to document what you're reading. How much time have we passed here? I'm not sure, but let me read a little bit more for you. I'm not going to finish it all, but I'll continue. So the months passed and the horizon started to dim, and that's the way it should have stayed. But then the world so far away intervened. For his own complicated reasons, the dictator at the time, Trujillo, passed a mandatory education act stipulating that all Dominican children under the age of 15 had to be in school and not stuck out in the fields. All children. Any parent keeping a child from school would be imprisoned. Nothing short of the threat of a year inside a Trujillo prison could snap the resistance that rural Dominicans had to the idea of educating their young. My mother heard about the law, and of course, and she brooded on it. The house, like all other houses in the Dominican Republic, had a portrait of Trujillo hanging in it. I guess my mother figured if anyone was going to protect her from her from my grandmother's wrath, it was going to be him. She'd only learn later how little our dictator protected her or anyone else. The news of the school came at a crucial time. My mother's family was preparing for its seasonal move up higher into the hills and the mist-soaked highlands where the coffee was waiting. But my mother had other plans. 2 days before the move, she got down on her knees beside a stagnant puddle of water, put her mouth in it, and drank deeply. She was so sick that the family decided they had to head into the hills without her. The coffee could not wait. My mother was left with a cousin. And as soon as my grandmother was out of sight, my mother bent over, double from the stomach pains, hobbled down to the schoolhouse, and reported my grandmother. That's a brave little girl. That's what I thought. I thought, wow, what a resourceful, brave little girl. And how determined, she was to secure the type of future that she envisioned for herself. So that's what my notes, right? I would probably do like some little notes on this side of the text right here, right? My admiration for, his mother, my admiration for her determination and the fact that she saw this vision in her life, that she did whatever was necessary to ensure that, it happened. I want to go to school was what she told the teacher. What should have happened was that the teacher should have laughed and sent her poor ass back to the hills to pick coffee. But as that turned out, let me scroll a little bit. But as it turned out, the teacher was an idealistic young woman from the capital. God bless all idealistic educators. And she took my mother's claims seriously, went to the police, who always took Trujillo's laws seriously. And so when my grandmother came back to fetch her daughter, she found my mother attending school. And when she tried to drag my mother up to the hills, the police put her in handcuffs, and that was that. Your grandmother beat me almost every day, my mother explained, but I got my education. She never did become a nurse, my mother. Immigration got in the way of that horizon. Once in the United States, my mother never could master English, no matter how hard she tried. And my God, did she try. But strange how things work. Her son became a reader and a writer, practices she encouraged as much as possible. I write professionally now, and life is long and complicated, and who knows how things might have turned out under different circumstances. But I do believe that who I am as an artist, everything that I've ever written was possible because a 7-year-old girl up in the hills of Azua knelt before a puddle, found courage in herself, and drank. Every time I'm in trouble in my art, I try to think of that girl. I think of that thirst, of that courage. I think of her. All right, get to reading, get to writing. You got this.